Well, you know why God made snakes before he made lawyers? He needed the practice.
That's Saul Goodman. Slick, shameless, and always selling. But before he was Saul, he was Jimmy McGill. And before Jimmy was Slippin' Jimmy, he was just a man trying to matter. Behind the jokes, the showmanship, and the technicolor ties is a deeply tragic story. A psychological case study of identity erosion, moral bargaining, and the slow death of someone who wanted to be good, but didn't believe he ever could be. Jimmy doesn't fall. He spirals. He circles the same choices over and over, each time thinking he's just bending the rules, just finessing the system. But by the end, he isn't bending anything. And the cost? Everything. To understand that spiral, we have to start at its center, Chuck McGill. In Season 1, we meet Jimmy struggling to build a career in the shadow of his older brother Chuck. Chuck's disapproval isn't just personal, it's existential. Jimmy wants to be seen as a good man, but Chuck sees through the performance. And worse, he convinces Jimmy to see himself that way too. He believes Jimmy's corruption is inevitable. When Jimmy works hard, passes the bar, tries to make something of himself, Chuck doesn't celebrate. He sabotages, secretly blocks his job application at HHM, tells Howard to be the face of the rejection, and that's the first major twist of the knife. Jimmy sees the law as redemption. Chuck sees Jimmy as a virus inside it. Chuck's condescension becomes prophecy, not because he's right, but because Jimmy starts to believe him. He starts to internalize this idea that no matter what he does, he'll never be enough. Not for the legal world, not for his brother, not for anyone who sees his past. And from that seed, Saul Goodman grows, not as a goal, but as a reaction.
Wait, Jimmy, what?
It's all good, man.
So what happens when someone who feels disqualified from legitimacy finds out they can still win just by playing dirtier? Jimmy doesn't see himself as evil. He sees himself as clever, someone who's just playing a rigged game better than the ones who made the rules. When he fakes a heroic billboard rescue to get PR, it works. When he forges Mesa Verde documents to sabotage Chuck and help Kim, it works. When he films cheesy commercials in front of the Constitution with hired actors and stock music, people call. And every time a con works, the stakes escalate, because each success isn't just a win. It's proof that Chuck was wrong. But there's a cost buried in those victories. People get hurt, trust erodes, and Jimmy's soul gets chipped away piece by piece. The Irene Landry subplot is a perfect example. In Season 3, Jimmy's trying to cash out his share of a class action lawsuit. But to do that, he needs the elderly plaintiffs to settle, specifically Irene, the sweetest one of them all. So he orchestrates a quiet social exile, gossips with her friends, plants doubt, makes her feel selfish. Eventually, Irene breaks. She signs. Jimmy gets the payout. But then he sees her, alone, teary-eyed, ostracized from the people who used to bake cookies with her, and something inside him breaks too. He stages a fake confession, lets everyone overhear him admit he manipulated her, wrecks his own reputation in the senior center. Because for once, Jimmy can't live with the win. But he doesn't learn, not really, because the next season, the cons keep coming, louder, riskier, deeper.
And that's where Kim Wexler comes in. Kim Wexler isn't Jimmy's opposite, she's his mirror. She believes in rules, until she doesn't. She fights for justice, until it feels like a performance. She wants to do good. But she can't stop loving how good it feels to bend the rules and win. Their scam against Howard Hamlin is peak Jimmy and Kim. They con a man, destroy his career, and push him into a breakdown, all so they can force a sandpiper settlement and get their money. And they do it with swagger, laughter, justifications, until Lalo Salamanca walks through the door. Howard is shot, in their apartment, mid-conversation. A man they both knew, who annoyed them, yes, but who was innocent, ends up dead. And not metaphorically, shot in the head, because their little con spiraled into something real, something deadly. And Kim? She leaves. She leaves Jimmy. She leaves the law. She leaves herself. Because for her, this is the line. the point where the game stops being a thrill and becomes a graveyard. Left alone, Jimmy doesn't reflect. He reinvents. Saul Goodman isn't a mask. He's an escape hatch. He wears flashy suits, speaks in legal puns, builds a clientele out of drug dealers and degenerates. Because Saul doesn't care about consequences, about morality. He builds a world where the only thing that matters is winning, where every conversation is a transaction, every relationship is a leverage point, every courtroom is a stage. But underneath it, Jimmy is still there. We see it in flashes, the quiet moments, the lingering glances, the little sighs. The moment he walks through his gaudy Saul Goodman house and seems exhausted. Saul Goodman is everything Chuck feared, and everything Jimmy thought he needed to become to matter. But by the time we reach the Gene timeline, even that identity collapses. The fall of Saul Goodman doesn't happen in a blaze. It happens in a mall, in Omaha, where a man named Gene Takovic tries to vanish into normalcy. In Omaha, Jimmy hides as Gene Takovic, a Cinnabon manager. But even in anonymity, he can't stop. He builds a new scam, starts recruiting low-level criminals, running cons, stealing identities. It's almost sad, because at this point, Jimmy isn't conning for survival. He's conning because he doesn't know how not to. And when he's finally caught, when he's facing a lifetime sentence, he doesn't lawyer up. He lawyers his way out, negotiates a deal down to 7 years in a cushy prison, even gets a prosecutor to laugh. For a moment, it seems like the Saul Goodman charm wins again. But then he sees Kim, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching, and suddenly, none of it feels like victory. So he tells the truth. He confesses, fully, openly, not just to the court, but to Kim, admits his role in Chuck's breakdown, in Howard's death, in the web of lies and pain he spun for years. And with that, the game ends. Jimmy McGill finally reemerges, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a man who finally understands the damage he's caused, who finally feels it, and chooses, deliberately, to sit with it. He doesn't get a redemption arc, he doesn't get the girl, he gets prison, but he also gets something else, honesty, identity, the end of the performance. And in the final scene, when Kim visits him in prison and they share a cigarette, it's silent, wordless, but loaded with something real. Because for the first time in his life, Jimmy McGill isn't selling, he isn't charming, he isn't escaping, he's just there. And in a show about a man who couldn't stop playing the game, that might be the biggest win of all.